It was the kind of night that felt heavy with secrets, the sky a blanket of inky blackness punctuated by stars that twinkled like distant eyes. I was driving along a desolate stretch of highway, the monotonous hum of the engine my only companion. My fuel gauge hovered perilously close to empty, and I cursed myself for not stopping sooner. After what felt like hours of nothingness, I spotted a flickering neon sign in the distance, Old Joe's Gas and Groceries. Relief washed over me as I turned into the cracked, gravel lot, the tires crunching beneath me. The gas station was a relic from a bygone era, its paint peeling and the glass windows clouded with grime. I stepped out of my car, the chill of the night air biting at my skin. As I approached the entrance, the bell above the door jingled, its sound echoing into the stillness. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, illuminating a small convenience store stocked with dusty shelves. The air was thick with the scent of oil and stale snacks, a mix that felt oddly nostalgic. "Hello." I called out, but the only response was the faint hum of the refrigerator in the corner. I walked toward the gas pumps outside, hoping to find someone who could assist me. The pumps were ancient, their rusted metal shells a stark contrast to the glossy cars that zoomed past on the highway. I fumbled for my wallet, scanning the area for signs of life. That's when I noticed a figure hunched over near the edge of the property, shrouded in shadows. "Hey!" I called, waving my hand. The figure turned slowly, revealing a weathered face beneath a cap, its features etched with years of hard living. It was Old Joe himself, or at least that's what the faded sign outside had claimed. "You need gas," he croaked, his voice gravelly, like gravel crunching underfoot. "Yeah, I'm almost out." "I didn't think anyone was here," I replied, glancing back at my car. "Most folks don't stop here anymore," he said, his gaze distant, as if he were staring into another time. "Not since the accidents." "Accidents?" I asked, intrigued despite my growing unease. "Yeah," he continued, his eyes narrowing. "Happened a long time ago. Bad things happen when the sun goes down around here. You best be careful." I shrugged off his warning, dismissing it as the ramblings of an old man. "I'll be fine. Just need to fill up and get going." Joe nodded slowly, turning to the pump. As he worked, I looked around the lot, noting the broken-down cars scattered like forgotten memories. One in particular caught my eye, a rusty sedan with a shattered windshield, vines creeping up its sides like fingers reaching for the sky. "Been sitting there for years," Joe said, following my gaze. "No one ever claimed it." "Why not?" I asked. "Because it's cursed," he replied, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Anyone who tries to take it ends up, well, let's just say they don't make it far." A chill ran down my spine, and I forced a laugh. "Sounds like a local legend." Joe didn't smile. Instead, he finished pumping gas and gestured for me to pay. $20, he said, handing me the nozzle. I took the receipt and glanced around the lot again, feeling an unsettling presence lingering just beyond my line of sight. As I climbed back into my car, I noticed a flicker of movement near the sedan. It was a shadow, darting between the vehicles, too quick to be a person. My heart raced. "Did you see that?" I asked Joe, my voice rising. "Best not to look too closely," he warned, his expression grave. "Just keep your eyes on the road, and don't stop until you're safe." With my tank full, I nodded, wanting nothing more than to leave this eerie place behind. I threw the car into gear, the engine sputtering to life. Just as I was about to pull away, I saw a figure standing next to the sedan, a young woman with long hair, her face pale and expression blank. "Wait!" I shouted, throwing the car in park. I stepped out, my instincts screaming at me to turn back. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" The woman didn't respond. Instead, she took a step forward, her eyes vacant, as if she were trapped in a dream. "Hey!" Joe yelled from behind me. "Get back in your car." But I couldn't move. The woman's gaze was piercing, and for a moment, I felt an overwhelming compulsion to reach out to her. "What's wrong?" I asked, taking a cautious step closer. "Help me," she whispered, her voice hauntingly soft, echoing with sorrow. Just then, I felt a rush of cold air sweep through the lot, snuffing out the warm glow of the gas station lights. Joe's shout echoed in my ears, but it was drowned out by a sudden rush of wind that sent a shiver down my spine. The woman's form flickered, and I realized with horror that she was fading, her features dissolving into the darkness. I stumbled back, fear gripping my heart. "No. Wait. Get back." Joe's voice boomed. "You can't help her. She's lost." But it was too late. The shadows coiled around the woman, engulfing her until she vanished into the night, leaving only the echo of her plea. Panic surged through me, and I rushed back to my car, my hands trembling as I fumbled with the keys. "Go. Now." Joe shouted, urgency lacing his voice. I didn't hesitate. I slammed the car into drive and sped out of the gas station, the gravel crunching beneath my tires. I glanced back in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the woman's ghostly figure standing in the lot. Instead, there was nothing but darkness, the neon sign flickering behind me like a dying star. As I drove down the empty highway, the weight of what had happened pressed down on me. The woman's plea echoed in my mind, a haunting reminder of the souls trapped within that cursed place. I could still feel Joe's words wrapping around me, a warning I should have heeded. Hours later, the landscape began to change, the trees thinning out and the highway stretching endlessly before me. I thought I was safe, but as I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. My heart raced as shadows danced along the side of the road, taunting me with the memories of that old gas station. Just as I convinced myself it was all in my head, I saw it, a flicker of light in the distance. I blinked, and when I looked again, it was gone. My stomach twisted as I realized I was back at the gas station, drawn by an unseen force. The sign swayed in the wind, its light flickering ominously. "No, no, no," I whispered to myself, gripping the wheel tightly. But my body had a mind of its own, steering me toward the entrance. As I pulled in, the familiar sense of dread washed over me. I saw Joe standing outside, his expression a mixture of concern and something else, something darker. "You shouldn't have come back," he warned, stepping closer to my window. "What is happening?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "Why am I back here?" "Because she called you," Joe said, his eyes wide with fear. "You can't escape her once she's chosen you." Panic surged through me as I glanced toward the sedan. The shadows danced at its edges, coiling like serpents. "What do you mean? Who is she?" "Just a girl who wanted to be remembered," he said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "And now she's looking for a way out." Before I could process his words, the wind howled around me, and the shadows began to shift and twist. I felt a pull, a compulsion to step out of the car and walk toward the darkness. "No!" I screamed, fighting against the force drawing me in. But it was too strong. I felt myself being pulled from my seat, the shadows wrapping around me like a cocoon. Joe shouted something, but his voice was lost in the chaos as the world around me warped and twisted. In that moment, I understood. The gas station wasn't just a stop on my journey, it was a trap, a place where lost souls were bound by their own desires. The woman had not just vanished, she had chosen me to carry her burden, to be the next keeper of her sorrow. As the darkness consumed me, I realized the truth, I had become a part of the gas station's curse. Forever entwined with the stories of those who had come before me, I was now one of them, a ghost in the night, waiting for the next unsuspecting traveler to stop at old Joe's gas and groceries. Driving down the abandoned highway, I felt an unsettling mix of exhaustion and anxiety. My fuel gauge was nearing empty, and the last thing I wanted was to run out of gas in the middle of nowhere. Just as I began to lose hope, a flickering light appeared on the horizon, a gas station, old and forgotten, but it would have to do. As I pulled into the gravel lot, I noticed the faded sign, Sam's Gas and Convenience. The windows were grimy, and the paint was chipped, but the pump stood like sentinels, waiting. I stepped out, the chill of the evening air wrapping around me like a shroud. "Hello?" I called, the sound echoing in the stillness. There was no response, only the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. The place felt eerily deserted, but I needed gas. I approached the nearest pump and reached for the handle, the metal cold against my skin. Suddenly, a voice broke the silence. "You shouldn't be here." I jumped, spinning around to find an older man leaning against the doorframe of the store. He wore a faded cap and a weathered face, his eyes dark and penetrating. "What do you mean?" I asked, heart racing. "Not many stop here anymore. This place has a reputation," he said, taking a step closer. "Sam's gone, you know. Can't trust what you find after dark." "Gone?" I frowned, glancing around. "Where is everyone?" He shrugged, a bitter smile playing on his lips. "This place has a way of swallowing people whole." I shrugged off his warning, too tired and desperate to care. "I just need gas. I'll be out of your hair." "Suit yourself," he replied, but the warning in his voice lingered as I filled my tank. The wind picked up, whistling through the cracks of the building, and I felt a strange chill settle over me. As I finished fueling, I glanced toward the store. It felt as though the shadows were shifting inside, moving with an unnatural fluidity. "Is someone in there?" I asked, but the man had retreated, his figure obscured by the dim light. Just then, I heard a soft laugh, a child's laugh, coming from the back of the gas station. I looked around, my heart pounding. "Hello?" I called out again, feeling an icy dread creep up my spine. No answer. Curiosity gnawed at me, and against my better judgment, I walked toward the sound. As I reached the side of the building, I saw a small boy playing near an old, rusted truck. He looked up at me, his face pale and shadowed. "Come play with me," he said, his voice sweet yet unsettling. "Where did you come from?" I asked, wariness creeping into my tone. "Is anyone else here?" He giggled, the sound echoing through the night, and pointed to the pump. "You can't leave." "Not yet." A shiver ran down my spine. "Why not?" I demanded, stepping back. "Because they're watching," he replied, his eyes glistening with an otherworldly light. "They want you to stay." "Who?" I pressed, heart racing. Before he could answer, the ground beneath me trembled. I turned, my breath catching in my throat as the shadows around the gas station began to writhe and shift. The man from before reappeared, his expression now grave. "Get in your car," he shouted. Panic surged through me. I bolted back to my vehicle, fumbling for the keys, but the boy stood in my way, his face twisted into a grin that sent chills down my spine. "You can't leave. They won't let you." I pushed past him, scrambling into the car and slamming the door shut. My hands shook as I inserted the key and turned the ignition. The engine sputtered, refusing to start. Come on," I pleaded, glancing up to see the man approaching, shadows swirling around him. "Please," I yelled, desperation rising in my throat. "I just want to go." Suddenly, the boy pressed his face against my window, his eyes wide and pleading. "Stay with us," he cried, the innocence of his voice twisted by an undercurrent of menace. With one last desperate twist of the key, the engine roared to life. I threw the car into gear, my heart racing as I backed out of the lot, the shadows reaching for me like hands grasping in the dark. The man stood frozen, a look of resignation on his face, while the boy's laughter echoed in the night. As I sped away, I dared to glance back, the gas station shrinking in the distance. The flickering neon sign dimmed, and the last thing I saw was the boy waving goodbye, a chilling smile plastered across his face. Hours later, as I drove further down the highway, I felt the weight of what had happened settle over me. The gas station had vanished from view, but the memories lingered like a bad dream. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see shadows lurking behind me, but there was nothing, only darkness. But just as I began to relax, the radio crackled to life, the static morphing into a child's laughter. My heart dropped, and I gripped the wheel tightly, knowing that Old Sam's was not just a stop along the way, it was a threshold, a reminder that some places should be left undisturbed. Driving through the desolate countryside, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the winding road. I had been on the highway for hours, and my gas light flickered ominously. Just as I began to panic, I spotted an old gas station, the flickering neon sign reading, Jim's service station, barely illuminating the gravel lot. I pulled in, relieved to see the place still open. The building looked dilapidated, but it had a certain charm, with vintage gas pumps standing like ghosts from another era. As I stepped out, the bell above the door chimed softly, an echoing sound that felt oddly welcoming. "Anyone here?" I called out, my voice swallowed by the stillness. The air was thick with the scent of oil and rust, and I glanced around the dimly lit store. Shelves lined with dusty snacks and faded drinks greeted me, but no one was in sight. I approached the counter, where an old man with a grease-stained cap appeared from the back room. "Evenin', stranger," he said, his voice raspy. "What brings you to Jim's at this hour?" "I just need some gas," I replied, glancing at my nearly empty tank. "And maybe a snack." "Gas is outside," he said, nodding toward the pumps. "But you might want to hurry. Strange things happen out here after dark." I chuckled nervously, dismissing his comment as folklore. "Thanks, I'll be quick." As I filled up my tank, I noticed a strange noise coming from the back of the station, a rhythmic thumping, like metal against metal. I hesitated, curiosity gnawing at me. "What's that noise?" I called to the old man, who was now leaning against the counter, watching me intently. He shrugged. "Just the mechanic. He's been working late." I frowned, surprised. "I didn't see a car in the shop." "Doesn't need one," he replied cryptically, his eyes narrowing. "You don't want to disturb him." A chill ran down my spine, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to know more. I finished pumping gas and decided to take a quick look inside the garage. I walked through the dimly lit doorway, the thumping growing louder. The garage was filled with tools hanging from the walls and grease-stained workbenches. In the far corner, a figure hunched over, obscured by shadows. "Hello," I called, taking a cautious step forward. The thumping stopped abruptly. The figure turned, revealing a man in a mechanic's jumpsuit, his face shadowed by a cap. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly. "Just curious," I replied, trying to mask my unease. "What are you working on?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just some repairs. Making sure everything runs smoothly." He gestured to a collection of rusty parts strewn across the bench. "You can never be too careful with old machinery." I glanced around, noting the eerie atmosphere. "Looks like you have a lot of work to do." "More than you know," he replied, his gaze piercing. "Sometimes the machines take on a life of their own." Feeling uneasy, I backed away, heading for the door. "Thanks, but I should probably get going." As I stepped outside, the air felt heavier, the shadows thickening around me. I climbed into my car and turned the key, but the engine sputtered and died. Panic set in as I tried again, but it was no use. The mechanic's laughter echoed in my mind, sending chills down my spine. "Need a hand?" the old man asked, leaning against the doorway, arms crossed. Looks like you're stuck. Yeah, it seems so, I replied, frustration boiling beneath the surface. What's wrong with it? Sometimes it's best to let things rest, he said, his tone unnervingly calm. Some machines don't like to be disturbed. Is there a phone here? I asked, desperate. I need to call for help. The old man shook his head slowly. No phone here. You're in the middle of nowhere, remember? Just then, the mechanic stepped out of the garage, wiping his hands on a rag. Looks like you're in a bit of a bind, he said, a sinister smile creeping across his face. But I can help. I appreciate it, but I think I'll wait for a tow, I stammered, feeling a primal urge to flee. Suit yourself, he said, shrugging as he returned to the shadows of the garage. I sat in my car, heart racing, listening to the oppressive silence. Every minute felt like an eternity. Just as I contemplated my next move, I noticed movement in the corner of my eye. The mechanic stood at the edge of the lot, staring at me, his expression unreadable. Hey! I called out, opening my door slightly. Can you help me? He tilted his head, the light casting eerie shadows across his face. You don't want my help, he replied, his voice dripping with malice. You'll only regret it. Fear coursed through me, and I slammed the door shut, desperately trying to start the engine again. This time, it turned over, the sound filling me with a glimmer of hope. But as I put it in reverse, the headlights flickered, illuminating the mechanic standing right behind me, grinning wider than before. Get out of the way! I shouted, panic escalating. But he didn't move. Suddenly, the gas station lights flickered ominously, plunging the lot into darkness. I heard a loud bang from the garage, followed by a guttural growl. My heart raced as I realized something was very wrong. Without thinking, I shifted into drive and sped toward the exit, the tires screeching against the gravel. As I tore down the road, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The gas station loomed behind me, a silhouette of shadows and menace. I drove for what felt like hours, the unease settling in my gut. Just when I thought I was free, I spotted headlights approaching from the opposite direction. As they drew closer, I felt a sense of dread wash over me, they flickered like the station's sign. I looked back, and my heart dropped. The gas station was right behind me again, as if it had followed me. The headlights grew brighter, revealing the mechanic standing in the middle of the road, arms outstretched. You can't escape, he bellowed, his voice echoing with a dark, twisted energy. I slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. The world around me blurred, and everything went black. When I woke up, I found myself back at Jim's service station, the lights flickering overhead. The old man stood nearby, his expression unreadable. You're lucky, he said softly. Most don't make it back. Back? I croaked, confusion swirling in my mind. What happened? You got too close, he replied. But now you're part of it. The mechanic never lets anyone leave. I looked around in horror, realizing I was trapped. The gas station was no longer just a stop along the road, it was a prison, and I had become its newest inhabitant. As the shadows closed in around me, I understood the truth. I was now part of the gas station's dark history, forever caught in a loop of fear and despair, waiting for the next unwitting traveler to stumble upon my nightmare. The fading light of dusk cast long shadows on the highway as I drove through the desolate countryside, my stomach grumbling and my gas gauge dipping perilously close to empty. I was miles away from the nearest town, and with the sun setting, I felt an unsettling tension in the air. Just as I began to lose hope, I saw it, a flickering neon sign up ahead. Carter's Gas and Groceries, it read, the light sputtering like a dying star. I pulled in, relief flooding through me. The station looked as if it hadn't been touched in decades, the paint peeling and the pumps rusted. As I stepped out, the bell above the door chimed, a welcoming sound that felt strangely out of place. "Hello." I called out, but my voice echoed back, unanswered. The interior was dimly lit, and the shelves were stocked with dusty goods, snacks long past their prime and cans whose labels had faded into obscurity. "Anyone here?" I asked again, but still no response. The silence was heavy, almost suffocating. I approached the register, glancing out the window at the gas pumps. Just then, an elderly man appeared from the back, his face lined with age and weariness. "Evenin', stranger," he croaked, wiping his hands on a rag. "What can I do for you?" "I just need to fill up my tank," I replied, relief flooding my voice. "And maybe grab a snack." "Sure thing," he said, nodding toward the door. "Gas is out back. Just be careful. This place has a history." "History?" I asked, intrigued but not particularly worried. "Strange things happen here at night," he said, his eyes narrowing as he leaned in closer. "People have gone missing. You don't want to be out there after dark." I brushed off his warning with a nervous chuckle. "I'll be fine. Just a quick stop." As I stepped outside, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The gas pumps loomed over me, their metal surfaces cold and uninviting. I pulled the nozzle from the nearest pump and began to fill my tank. That's when I heard it, a soft whisper, almost like a sigh, carried on the wind. "Help me." I glanced around, but there was no one in sight. My heart began to race, the unease settling deeper in my gut. I shook my head, dismissing it as my imagination playing tricks on me. Just as I finished filling up, I saw something move out of the corner of my eye. A figure stood at the edge of the lot, a girl, no older than 12, with long dark hair and a tattered dress. She seemed out of place, her eyes wide and searching. "Please," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You have to help me." "What's wrong?" I asked, stepping closer. "Are you lost?" "They won't let me leave," she said, her gaze darting toward the darkening woods behind the station. "You have to help me get out of here." Fear gripped me, but something about her voice tugged at my heart. "Who won't let you leave?" I pressed, glancing back at the old man, who was now watching us from the door with a look of concern. "The ones who came before," she replied, her voice trembling. "They want me to stay." Before I could respond, the old man's voice rang out, sharp and urgent. "Get away from her," he shouted, causing me to jump. "You don't know what you're dealing with." The girl flinched, her expression shifting to one of fear as she stepped back into the shadows. "Please, don't listen to him," she pleaded. "I just want to go home." "What's going on?" I asked, panic rising. "Is she in danger?" The old man shook his head, his face grave. "She's not what she seems. You need to leave now." My instincts screamed at me to run, but I felt frozen. The girl's eyes were pleading, and I wanted to believe her. "I can't just leave her here," I said, torn. "Get in your car," the old man insisted, his voice rising in desperation. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. A cold wind swept through the lot, carrying with it the faint sound of laughter, high-pitched and mocking. The girl's face twisted in fear, and I realized too late that the shadows around us were deepening, coiling like tendrils of smoke. "Please," she cried out, but I felt an invisible force pulling me back toward my car. I stumbled away from her, my heart racing as I jumped into the driver's seat. "Get away from her!" I yelled at the old man. But he was gone, replaced by the girl, who now stood directly in front of my vehicle, her face pale and ghostly. "You can't leave," she shrieked, her voice echoing with despair. "You're trapped." I slammed the door and turned the key in the ignition, but the engine sputtered and died. My heart raced as I tried again, panic clawing at my throat. "No, no, no!" I shouted, my mind racing. The girl moved closer, her eyes filled with a haunting sadness. "Help me," she begged, reaching out as if to touch the window. "You're my only chance." Desperation consumed me. "What do I need to do?" I cried, looking at her through the glass, willing my car to start. "Get me out of here," she shouted, her voice growing frantic. As if on cue, the wind picked up, swirling around us, and the laughter grew louder, echoing from the depths of the gas station. Shadows darted around, and I felt the oppressive weight of unseen eyes upon me. With one last desperate turn of the key, the engine roared to life, and I slammed the gear into reverse. I backed away quickly, the girl's face fading into the darkness as I tore down the highway, my heart pounding in my chest. But just as I began to relax, I glanced in the rearview mirror, and my blood ran cold. The gas station loomed behind me, the neon sign flickering like a dying flame. The girl stood at the edge of the lot, her expression twisted in anguish. I felt the weight of my decision settle over me, a heavy shroud of guilt. I had chosen to escape, but at what cost? As the gas station faded into the distance, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had left something behind, something that would haunt me forever. As I drove deeper into the night, I could still hear her voice, echoing in the back of my mind. "Help me." And I knew I would never truly escape the shadows of Carter's gas and groceries.